Well, this week's Sky Cricket podcast comes to you from Delhi, which is where I am, one of the great cities of the world, and Chelmsford, which is not one of the great cities of the world, which is where you are, Nas, as ever, chained to chained to Chelmsford. I see you've moved into the East Wing this week of the house. You were recording from the West Wing last week. What's happened?
Floods. That's what's happened. I mean, I'm going to read you this. Firstly, I've got man flu. Right, I'm ill. So I am seriously ill. A lesser man wouldn't be able to do this podcast today. I noted yesterday we were supposed to do this podcast, and you pulled out because of a long lunch in Delhi, like a beefy long lunch that we used to have. So I'm ill. The weather is miserable. It has literally rained here for a month. So don't send me WhatsApps like you have been about Dharamshala and how there's some pictures of it raining there and how it might sleet in the test match. I do not want to know about the weather in Dharamshala either today, next week, any time, because it's a lot better than it is in England at the moment.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Dharamshala and the weather because that's where we can go right now. Our guest is joining us from there. I'm delighted to say that it's a man who's played 139 test matches, 11,600 runs, 3,168 wickets, 192 catches, and for the most part, an expert at playing the reverse ramp. Welcome, Joe Root. How's life, Joe?
Yeah, it's pretty good, thank you. Bit chilly here though. It's been sleeting all day. It's been very
Don't
wet.
mention the weather.
It's felt just like home. It's been a nice ease back into things for when we finally get home.
Tell us what you've been up to, because obviously there's been quite a break since the Ranchi Test match. I understand that the golfers amongst you, of which you were among that number, went to Bengaluru, and then about 5 or 6 of the other players went up to Chandigarh.
Yeah, that's it really. We just managed to find a nice golf course where we could go and play for a few days and relax and get away from it whilst we had this little break. And the rest of the squad went to Chandigarh and had a nice time there, relaxing and sort of just waiting for this test match to come round, really. It's been quite a strange way how it's all fallen in terms of the schedule, but looking forward to getting back to it now and finishing hopefully nice and strongly.
Am I right in saying it was Jonny Bairstow who organised the trip to Bengaluru?
Yeah, Johnny's tours did a brilliant job. We all had a great time.
How was your golf, John?
Some good, some bad. A bit like this tour, really.
Well, it's good. I mean, that's convenient that we brought up Johnny's name there, because that's where I wanted to start, really. 100 test match this week. Brendan pretty much confirmed that he's going to play, obviously, in Dharamshala. So it's going to be a very moving occasion for him, a great milestone for him. And obviously somebody that you have just grown up with, really. There's a year's difference between you both. Can you remember when you very first met Jonny Bairstow and what your impressions were for the first time?
Yeah, I'd have been 12 years old, playing in like the junior section at Yorkshire and starting to get involved at the academy there on a scholarship with the rest of those young lads coming through. And Jonny was always the sort of superstar. He obviously had the difficult tag of his father's footsteps to follow, but he always lived up to it. He was one of those guys that always excelled, was, if you like, top of the class, went from strength to strength, was that leading player, if you like, all the way to getting into the first team. So it's been great to play alongside him for so long. Got a number of stories, I'm sure we can retell probably at the end of his career. You could sit down forever and we could go through it for hours. We could have a whole show on it.
Was it always obvious that cricket was going to be his thing? Because I think I'm right in saying he was an outstanding all-round sportsman, wasn't he? He was a great rugby player. I think he played football pretty well. Were you always aware that cricket was going to be his thing?
That's the environment I knew him. He's always, as you say, he was always a very talented sportsman growing up, and especially if you asked him. But no, seriously, he was, and he's always been very talented at everything. He's got a lot of stick this week for playing off too high a handicap at golf because he's been battering everyone. But serious talent, and it's basically, as you see on the cricket field, that's how he takes all of his sport. Really, someone that's very competitive. but very talented, and very likes to, I suppose, wear his emotions on his sleeve a little bit as well, which I think makes him what he is. Brings the best out of him, and one of the really genuinely kind people. Wants to do everything for you, and might not always come across like that on the screen, but he's got a really good heart, and someone that will always have your back and look after you.
He's always seems to be at his most dangerous when he's got a point to prove. Some people feel he's got a point to prove in his 100th Test match coming up. Has he always been like that? Has he someone that if you knock and someone that you put down, he will go out there and show you?
A good example of that would be there was end of one of the seasons for Yorkshire where he'd just broken into the first team. Me and Gary Balance were coming through in the second team, and we were all called into a meeting with the president at the time, Geoffrey Boycott. And he sat us all down, and he sort of said to me and Gary, look, you're playing very well in the second team. Keep working hard. Keep doing certain things right, and it won't be long till you get in the first team. He said, Johnny, you've had an exceptional year in the second team. You've come into the first team, got 4 or 5 brilliant 50s. I've got 148 first-class hundreds. If you want to borrow one, you can, because you've not looked like converting one of those scores. And I think one of his very next games, he went on and got a double 100, and that was his first 100 in first-class cricket. And that's just one of the examples of him, going out there, showing everyone how good he is, and making a point when it's needed.
I was thinking that he actually made his debut just a little bit before you, didn't he? He was the summer of 2012. You were the following winter. But if you look now, you've played 139 games, and he's just about to bring up his 100th, which suggests that you've been more of an ever-present in the team, that he's missed quite a few games, whether it be through injury, but also the selectors have not always quite known how to deploy his strengths, because his all-round ability as both keeper and batter. Have you felt that has made him a little bit more insecure than some other people, and he's always had to fight to kind of become one of those names that's always on the team sheet? Have you felt that through his career?
I think you guys know it probably better than anyone, playing through the 90s when it was very difficult to keep your place within that team. It's been a little bit more secure throughout my career. You've generally had a bit more of a run of things, but we've had obviously numerous coaches over that period of time that wanted to probably set the team up slightly differently, try and balance things out. And I think with Johnny, you could play him as a batter, you can play him as a keeper batter. He can offer so much. He's got such a wide range of skill set. It can be sort of misinterpreted sometimes of what his actual best strengths are. I think we've seen a number of different of his best innings. It's not been the same sort of mould that he's gone out and scored those big runs. You look at his 150 at Cape Town was a very different look to the blistering 100 he got at Trent Bridge against New Zealand. And similarly, the 100 he got in Sydney last time we were in Australia, again, had a very different look to the one that he scored in Sri Lanka batting at number 3. So he has had to deal with a lot of change and being moved around, whether it be throughout the batting order or keeping or just as a batter. But that's part and parcel of international cricket. You've got to try and fit into the team. And for the majority of it to go on and play 100 Test matches proves that he's been able to do that very well for long periods of time and offered a huge amount to English cricket.
As Joe mentioned the 90s there, there's a comparison obviously with someone we played a lot of cricket with, the gaffer, Alec Stewart. In that Alec would do whatever the team wanted, but you had Jack Russell there, and we had to, without a great all-rounder, Beefy had just retired, we were trying to manage our bowlers. Sometimes Jack would play, sometimes Alec, most of the time Alec would play as a keeper batter. The difference was that Alec, I think if you asked Alec, and I did the other day, he would have just preferred to open the batting with you or Graham Gooch, and the keeping give it to Jack Russell or whoever. Fair to say with Johnny, he absolutely loves the gloves for so many different reasons. If you took the gloves off him, he feels hard done by. Would that be a fair thing to say with Bairstow?
I just think he wants to contribute and he wants to be the main man. I think that's what a lot of people want, is to be able to contribute and make a big impact in the game. And clearly, the more skills that you put yourself forward for, the more chances you have of doing that. Whether there's an element of security to that or not, I think he's the only one that can really tell you that. But I think you look at a lot of the best players across the game, and likes of Ben, Andrew Flintoff, that they you generally get more out of them the more involved they are in things, and the more immersed in the game they are. So I wonder if it's just and more of an element of that, wanting to impact the game as often and as frequently as possible.
I guess there's been two periods for him, haven't there, where he's excelled at both aspects that you've talked about. There was that period probably just after the Cape Town maiden 100, that took a long time coming. I think it was his 22nd test or something like that. But then for a period of about 3 years, you'd say his performances as a keeper batter, batting at 7 and keeping, were probably of world-class standard. And then when he was brought back under you for the Ashes at Melbourne, and he got that 100 at Sydney, playing as a batter, and then I think he got 600s in the next 8 test matches, and obviously the summer of 2022 when he became almost the standard bearer for Bazball, if we can use that term. I know you don't like to use it, but we'll use it. And would you say that he was at his best in those two particular periods of his career?
Yeah, I think so. There's been a lot happened between the two of them, but again, it just shows the resilience of the player to be able to come back and almost have to remodel yourself in a different role within that team to still have such an impact. And played some vital innings as well since that major injury that he had. It's awful and amazing that he was able to come back from that as he has done. But just looking forward as well, you look at this week, you couldn't write a better script for Jonny Bairstow, could you? 100 test matches.
I was going to ask you, what have you got planned? Because I think before your 100th test match in Chennai, I was reading that, I think the team showed you a compilation of your greatest performances, and you went out and got a double 100 the next day. What have the team got planned for Jonny? Do you know?
Not sure. I don't want to break any surprises of it just yet, but I'm sure there'll be something. And with Jonny, how much it means to him to play for England. I think the other thing that you got to factor in is the fact that for a long time he's been a major part of all 3 teams, and the wear and the mental fatigue that can have on players, and being able to be skillful enough to switch across the formats very quickly and adapt to that and not let it affect your form or your mental state going into each different one, and to continually be consistent it's a very hard thing to do for long periods of time. And throughout his career, he's always been at the top of at least one or two of those formats, which again is an incredible feat to be able to say. But yeah, it'll be an emotional week for him. You'll be able to see when we huddle up and there's that presentation, every bit of emotion that he'll be feeling, and it'd be really nice to be able to be there and to share that with him. And
it's got to be you to give the speech, hasn't it? A fellow Yorkie.
I mean, I'm not a good talker. They'd be wasted if I did it. But I'd definitely fluff my lines and ruin it. So I wouldn't sleep trying to make sure I didn't get it wrong the night before. But yeah, we'll see. I've not had the tap on the shoulder for that yet, so I'm sure there'll be something very special in line for it, and deservedly so too.
Yeah, it's going to be a great week for him. We shouldn't forget, actually, that it's a 100th Test match for Ravi Ashwin as well this week, who you've played a lot against. I just wondered, I see him, I mean, there's 2 finger spinners, off spinners who've got to 500 wickets, him and Nathan Lyon. I kind of see Murali more as a wrist spinner, even though he spun it as an off spinner. I just wondered how you saw Ravi Ashwin as a competitor and somebody that you played against frequently.
Yeah, clearly anyone that can take that many wickets, regardless of how many of them are in home conditions, to be able to be that skillful and to offer a very different skill set to a lot of off spinners as well. He uses the crease very differently to how your traditional off spinner might. He bowls overspin, side spin, can get really tight into the stumps, can use the crease, get wider, has got carom balls and lots of different tricks. So you've just got to be really wary of all the different threats that he poses, and make sure you've got really good skills to combat that and try and get on top of him. But had some really good battles with him over a long period of time now, but also got to to see him up close at Rajasthan in the IPL last year as well. And he's very clear on how he wants to get better and make sure he gets all the stuff done he needs to be ready. And you can see why he's been as successful as he has been.
Compare and contrast. I mean, Nathan Lyon overnight as we speak, another fifer for him in New Zealand. I think he's got fifers in 9 different countries, which is remarkable as a finger spinning off spinner. So compare and contrast. You're lining up as a batter to Ashwin and Lyon. What are the different challenges, would you say?
I'd say with Ashwin is making sure that you don't play the previous ball. He's very good at trying to drag you across the crease, get your head one side of it, try and beat both edges quite frequently. With Lyon, it's all about overspin, I think, especially in the first half of the test match. Looks to get really over the top of the ball, get bounce, bowl in between you, like knee roll and hip, and try and bring short leg and leg slip in the game as much as he can, and then just slowly get slower with his pace and drift wider into those footholds that Mitchell Stark has so kindly done for him for such a long period of time. Whereas Ashwin is probably slightly more trying to find ways of getting you out rather than trying to wear you down like Lyon will over long periods of time. And that's how I've always tried to approach them, try and be clear, right, if that's how they're generally going to operate. Obviously, it's not always going to be like that, and you've got to adapt at the time and see what's in front of you. But if you can sort of have an idea of roughly ahead of things and pre-plan things, then in terms of practice, you can feel as ready as you can be to just go out and try and take them on.
He's a very smart off spinner, isn't he? He did that masterclass or just a little thing at the screen with Ian Ward a few years ago on the tour of England, and he explained about the seam position and wrist position and using the crease. And I think the Indian management quickly whizzed him away, saying, don't give away any more of your secrets. And DK was excellent in the last test match, talking about him bowling with the new ball and the old ball and the seam and his undercutting with the new ball, the ball that got Ollie Pope out, if anything, pitched. And almost, I don't know how, as an off spinner, went that way. So, and then as the ball gets older, he gets a bit more side spin on it and a bit more drop on it. Is he a different challenge with new ball and old ball?
Yeah, there's different things to contend with as well. It's the way it gathers pace off the wicket, because of his seam position and how cleverly he can move it around. Obviously, if it's the shiny side, it has that extra bit of skid. So you've got to make sure that your footwork's sharp and you're in position that little bit quicker. You're not lazy with your feet. Because I think that's when he comes really into his own, is when you're still on the move and the ball's, in that sort of danger area that you want to avoid playing it from. So you just be making sure you're as aware to that as possible. But as I say, if you've got a nice firm seam and then you're skidding it on, you've got both edges in play for long periods of time, and the fact that he can get really tight in and drift the ball away from straight, you can bring slip in as well as those fielders tight in on the leg side too.
Do you pick seam position when you're batting against him?
I'd like to say yeah. I'd like to say so. I'd like to think so, but he's probably going to get me out twice in the game now I've said that this week.
Good luck, Joe.
But yeah, you're trying to look for any cues that you can. Every time I've had a chat with one of you two, whether it's about reverse or something, I think Ather was at your dot ball percentage in one day cricket. The next game, I was like 20 off 50 or something, and then got hit in the face the last time I did a reverse scoop thing for you guys during 100. So. But no, I think as a batter, you're trying to look for as many cues as you can to give yourself the best chance as early as possible. You always got to, I think you have to look to try and play it off the wicket as well, but you want to be in a position where if you can smother the ball or you can give yourself as much time as possible to get right back and see what it does off the surface, then you're going to give yourself the best chance of succeeding against it.
The other thing is seems to me, at least, I haven't played against him, obviously, but it seems to me that he's a real competitor. That he's almost got a kind of fast bowler's mentality in a spinner's body. And we talked about Jonny Bairstow to 100 tests, Ravi Ashwin. Do you think that's the one thing that is common to all players who've played that amount of games, test matches for their country, that kind of inner drive and inner competitiveness that reveals itself in different ways? Certain people look more laid back, don't they? David Gower kind of looked more laid back, but he had that inner drive and competitiveness. Do you think that's if you were to pick out one kind of common thing from those players, do you think that's it?
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, and just love to win. I think you look at anyone that's had long periods of success, there's a serious want to add to a team and to contribute. And some guys will look at the game slightly differently and chase personal milestones, knowing that if they do that, then they're going to be contributing and they're going to be helping the team. And others will have different drivers, such as, how can I impact this game, and how can we get us into a strong position to either bowl a team out, or knock a score off, or set the game up nicely. So I think anyone that's played for long periods of time, they've got that steeliness about them. They might have different ways of showing it, but there's definitely that ingrained competitor within them.
Which leads me on nicely to your last Test 100. Jonny Bairstow is someone that reads everything, and as we've mentioned, likes a point to prove. Joe Root, that sort of boyish smile that you've got on your face right now, was missing in that last Test 100. Did you feel you had a point to prove? Had you read stuff about the shot you'd played? Or was it just a case of you thinking, I haven't contributed as much as I should have done recently, and I'm going to double down here and get 100? What were you thinking? What were your thoughts in that 100?
My thoughts were, I try not to read too much of what you write, Nas, even though a lot of the time I agree with what you say. But no, I tried to just play the game in front of me. I felt short of runs. I felt like I'd not contributed how I'd expect myself to and how I wanted to coming into this tour. It's part of the world that I love batting in, and I've had previous success here and had high expectations of myself. And until the last Test match, it was way below where I wanted to be. And I played a couple of poor shots, but I been trying to play the situation and play the game that's in front of me. And I looked at that situation and those conditions there, and it didn't need anything flamboyant. It needed someone to be constant throughout, to try and keep like a calm feel to things when that odd ball did react badly, and just try and build partnerships. In this part of the world, how if you get two guys in there for a period of time, it can seem like a completely different wicket to starting out your innings. And that was the sort of mentality I went into after my first 10, 20 balls, and found that that was the most successful way of scoring for my game on that surface. But I think that people will have their own opinions on how I've got out throughout this series and what's the best for me. I'll continue to keep trying to play the way that I think's best for any given situation. No one knows my game as well as I do. The reason I've got to where I've got to is because I've always looked to keep trying to get better and keep trying to improve and keep trying to evolve, and that's got to keep happening. If you stand still in this game, with the amount of information and analysis out there, you will get found out and you will stand still and people will work you out. So I'm not always going to get it right. I'm going to make the odd mistake. But in that last Test match, it's not. I don't think this is a cowardly way of looking at it. But I could have played a cover drive and chopped that onto the stumps, or got caught second slip, and got out in a similar fashion to the game before to Bumrah. And then there could have been noise around having a problem outside off stump to that particular bowler. It's just how it was. It did actually keep low. That's why I edged it. But you could say you didn't need to play that shot in that moment. But whenever I have played it, you could also say that too. Similarly to when I dab that one down to third man every now and again, top of off stump. It's a shot that scores me a lot of runs. It's one that asks different questions of the bowler and could have changed the complete complexion of that morning with them a bowler down. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about Ashwin not being there. If you see off Bumrah, if Bumrah goes at 4 and over in that spell, they've got one less person to turn to under pressure, and we could get ahead of the game even quicker on a potentially deteriorating wicket and put more pressure on India later on in the Test match. So, they were my thought processes at that time, and I stick by them. I'd look at the execution of it, and and most importantly, not take that baggage into the next Test match. I think that's the most important thing. You are going to get out at some point. It doesn't matter how it looks like in the scorebook, as we all know. And the most important thing is that you put your best foot forward in the next game and try and make sure that you make those big scores that help you win test matches.
I listened to some of your comments after the 100, and I sensed a little bit of frustration about the fact that we in the media, we obviously refer to Bazball because it's just kind of a simple way of referring to this period under which, you know, Ben Stokes and Brendan McCullum have been in charge. But I got a sense of a frustration that you think we almost reduce it down to something that's a little too simplistic and a little bit more simplistic, and that actually the team is a bit more savvy and think about it a lot more than that simple reduction to one terms suggests. Is there that frustration within the team?
I wouldn't say too much frustration within the team. I think the most important thing is we've got to keep trying to find ways of getting the best out of each other and the best out of each other's games. And if you look at the last 2 years, however long it's been since Ben took over as captain and Brendan came in as coach, look at our batting lineup in particular, the consistency throughout it, and some of the individuals' performances over the last 2 years have been in stark contrast to what they were before that. You look at our top order, it's far more consistent than it has been for a long, long time. You could argue since Cook and Strauss, really, especially the last year or so. I think Crawley and Duckett have been phenomenal together. They've done some wonderful things and put some, a number of, I think pretty much every game we've had at least one, probably mostly 250 partnerships in every innings or 40 plus partnerships. And this part of the world can be quite tricky to do, especially in the second innings. Ollie Pope's, looks very settled and in that position at number 3. Made a brilliant score at the start of this series, and since Ben and Baz came in, he's been a completely different player. And we seem to be getting the best out of these younger guys that have been maybe a little bit less settled under a different captain. So, I think that's the bigger picture is that it's not about going out and blasting it. It's like, how can we get the best out of each other and what's going to bring the best out of their individual games? And it won't always be one way. There's going to be times where you've got to be pragmatic and you've got to play slightly differently. But when you get your chance to express yourself in the best possible version of yourself, then I think you have to take it. And I think more often than not, those guys have done that. I think the thing that's been disappointing about this trip is the experienced guys like myself have not been the ones that have contributed around their performances. So I think that's where it probably looks a little bit unmatched in this series.
And is there that frustration as we go into the final test match? It stands at 3-1. How does the team look back at the last 4 tests? Are you saying to yourselves, well, we've competed often from session to session and the games have been very nip and tuck for the most part? Or are you saying, well, we've missed some opportunities as well, and therefore there's that frustration remains?
I don't think this team does regret, really. To be honest, I think it's you've got to learn from every opportunity that you have out there. But I also, if you look back at it, which probably will do at the end of the series, or personally anyway, and you look at our last tour here, it's been a stark difference in terms of how we've actually performed. If you take the results completely out of it, I think as well, you look, we lost our experienced spinner after the first test match to guys making their way one in his first game, 2 debutants, to perform how they have throughout. I think shows great promise and strength for us moving forward, especially in the subcontinent, for a long period of time to come. And we've found things out that we didn't know before this series, I think would be fair to say. And we've had some guys that mainly the second tour of India, having the experience of that COVID series, come out and done some wonderful things as well, and either been consistent like Zach has, or had big hundreds like Ben Duckett after his first tour, and Ollie Pope 190 as well. So I think the team, there is things probably from a more long-term point of view, looking at things that have set us in a good place moving forward. It's just, you obviously results is what you're going to get judged on externally, but there are obviously things that have been very good throughout as well.
Have you enjoyed the trip, Joe? I mean, India is a great place to tour. You've done that previous tour out there. You've done a World Cup recently. You've done Rajasthan Royals. You've now got this tour. Do you love being in that part of the world, or do you just get mobbed everywhere you go?
You do get mobbed, but it's all part and parcel of the experience. There's some wonderful things that you can do out here, and all of the games they contain a great atmosphere. I think the one thing that's been missing this series is having Virat Kohli here and seeing the whole ground fill up and then empty again when he gets out. That's been the only difference really this time. But the passion for the game here is second to none. They love their cricket, and people look at Test cricket and say it's might be second fiddle in this part of the world in particular. But you look at the crowds and the enthusiasm within the grounds in particular. You certainly wouldn't say that being there live at the games. And it's always a pleasure to come play here. It's just been a small frustration that I've not been able to make some bigger scores more frequently. But one more chance to go out there and help us try and win another Test match.
Well, I reckon it's going to be a bit like batting at Headingley in March or something. So you'll be the best man, no doubt. You and Jonny, local knowledge, local conditions. Thanks for joining us. Don't want to keep you too long, but it's been a pleasure as always to chat to you. I'm coming up to Dharamshala tomorrow, so no doubt we'll catch up over the next 5 days. And fingers crossed for another. I mean, the Test cricket that we've seen has been fantastic to watch, and fingers crossed you get on the right end of it throughout the next few days.
Cheers, Athers. Thanks, Nas.
Well, we talked there, Nas, about all the kind of common traits that these players who've played for 10, 15 years for their country share. One of them, competitiveness and hard-nosed competitiveness to will to win. But not everybody is as humble as Joe Root. I'm always incredibly impressed with the way that he talks so easily about the comparison of the Stokes-McCullum regime with what went before, because obviously that was when he was in charge. And, as we've all been there as captains, and then you've played under the following captain, it is not an easy thing when that comparison is made, is it? But he copes with it admirably.
He does, because he's a high-class individual, really, from the moment he came in the side. And that's why I mentioned about him playing with a smile on his face. He just loves playing cricket. He never forgets that child growing up in Sheffield, playing Sheffield Collegiate schoolboy cricket, what it means to him, whether it be under a different regime. And you're right, I nearly turned to him there and asked him about the previous regime when he hinted at it, but I wasn't going to be so cruel. So listen, his best mate Stokes is in charge, so he will give it absolutely everything for Stokes. The other thing, a little bit like Ashwin, actually, and with these great players, with Joe, when he speaks about batting, like when he was speaking there for a long time about his thought processes, you hang on every word. There's a lot of thought that goes into Joe Root, the cricketer. It's not just the talent you're given or born with, it's also how you think about your own game and look to improve.
Yeah, and he's certainly made the most of it. Dharamshala starts on Thursday. This is acting as our preview for that. But there's actually
what do we know about Dharamshala? Apart from the weather, what do we know? When we were there for the World Cup, it did look like it helped the seamers a little bit more, and it went through a little bit more. Are we expecting the same?
I think so, just because of the weather that they've had. It's been very wet the last few days. It's obviously much cooler than when we were there in October. It seems a long time ago, doesn't it? England played Bangladesh there, if you remember, one of the few wins that they've had in India over the 4 months that they've been there this winter. But if you look at the stats, Benedict sent us the stats, didn't he, the other day, about the last 10 years of first-class cricket there, where generally it's favoured the seamers over the spinners. There won't be many venues in India where that will be the case. So I think you'll expect to see England. Well, they're certainly not going to go in with one seamer. They'll definitely go in with two. They may even go in with three, which would be interesting. Do they give Gus Atkinson a run out? If they only played one spinner, which spinner will it be? And for India, Bumrah is back to stiffen their seam bowling attack. So obviously they'll be buoyed by his return. Patidar's the question mark, whether he gets one more opportunity. And so we'll wait and see on their team selections. What about just turn our attentions elsewhere? Since we last spoke, quite a bit has happened, hasn't it, in the world of cricket? I mean, Australia have turned over New Zealand in the first Test match there, and they've got an incredible record against New Zealand. And Ireland won their first Test match against Afghanistan, which was a great moment for them.
Yeah, some great scenes from that Ireland Test match. Brilliant for them. And you know, the Australia-New Zealand game was going one way, then t'other, and they prepared a green top. When I looked at that pitch, I thought that's a brave thing to do against that Australian bowling attack, and it proved to be the case, really. Having said that, the green top, Nathan Lyon bowled brilliant. I think he got 10 for in the game, didn't he? I mean, he is just a phenomenal finger spinner, one of the all-time greats. We touched on it there, the challenges facing him when we spoke to Joe Root. So, yeah, and also in India itself, Af, there's been some central contracts have been announced. What have you made of it? They seem to be trying to back first-class cricket. Do you think they've got it right?
It goes back to a leaked memo that was published by a lot of outlets here in India a few weeks ago, where the BCCI had written to their contracted players to say that they expected them to play domestic cricket. I suppose there's two elements to that. One, I think that's a good thing. I think players should be encouraged to play domestic cricket. You never forget where you've come from. It also helps to, improve the standards of first-class cricket. And you just can't have a situation, I don't think, where players are completely separate from the system which has produced them and which they are part of. So I believe the connections are very important. It also may be that the BCCI is slightly worried, about the power of the IPL, and clearly young players coming through are looking at that, and if their focus then is shifting towards white ball cricket, that will be a consequence. And I think the BCCI in that leaked letter said something like, it's a shift we hadn't anticipated. Well, a lot of people have been anticipating that shift, so it may just reflect on a little bit of uncertainty there.
If you do that, I've got a few things to say, really. Make sure you're consistent. That when you go all the way, once you start saying, well, you're not playing first-class cricket or whatever, make sure, I'm not saying that they haven't been, but then you have to be consistent across the board. You can't have one rule where they didn't play, but they can have a few weeks off here and there. I was also a little bit surprised. I mean, Shreyas Iyer, we talked about the World Cup earlier. He had a magnificent World Cup. He was smashing it everywhere, and white ball cricket is a huge part of Indian cricket. There's
I think I'm right in saying they implied that they would get back on the contract list as soon as,
But the third thing is about, I've always looked at Indian cricketers, and in an era of mental health and mental well-being, the amount of cricket they play, and they throw themselves at everything full on. And also being an Indian cricketer, it's not like you can slip off and disappear for a while. You're on show all the time, even when you're not playing cricket. And I know Ishan Kishan took a break for his mental health and his mental well-being. So you don't want to force players into feel like they've got to play. Shreyas Iyer played a lot of cricket, played the first 2 Test matches, got left out of the Test side. For me, that would be a time just to say, right, I need a little bit of a break from the game here. So I don't know the rights and wrongs of it, but also make sure you look after your cricketers, that you're not forcing them to play cricket when they may need just a little break.
So I'm moving on from Delhi. I have to tell you, I've been blown away by Delhi. Incredible, right. Really. Excellent. The last time England played a Test match in Delhi, I think, was 1985. So it is a long, long time ago. And that's really the reason why I haven't spent any time in this city at all. Just kind of popped in for the odd one-day game and popped out. So never really had a chance to look around. But I've spent the last 2 days being a Tommy tourist here in Delhi. And it's an incredible city, I have to say. I mean, I went to the Red Fort, the old part of the city, which was unbelievable. Humayun's tomb, which is a kind of 15th, 16th century Mughal, magnificent piece of Mughal architecture. The parks here and India Gate. It's an absolutely stunning city. So that has been great fun to kind of get acquainted with Delhi for the first time after all these years.
Yeah, Chelmsford's nice this time of year as well.
Well, I'm very surprised to see you in Chelmsford. I mean, the whole world has gone to Jamnagar, as far as I can see, for the Ambani's pre-wedding. Did you not get your invite?
I'm just waiting. I saw Rihanna was there. I'll text Rihanna and see if I'm supposed to be there. She got something like £6 million. I mean, I would turn up for £6. Come on, Mr. Ambani. I need
the only cricketer who's not there, as far as I can see.
Right. Well, I'm really pleased you've had a good week in Delhi. When do you fly?
I fly tomorrow, Tuesday. I think England then tomorrow, Monday. England are practicing Tuesday, Wednesday, if the weather is okay. And then the test match starts Thursday. So, I mean, it's been a long old haul for England. I know there's a gap between the World Cup and the Test series, but they probably spent the best part of almost 4 months there now. It seems a long time since they were playing Bangladesh at Dharamshala. So this will be their last hurrah. Although somebody like Jonny Bairstow is obviously coming for the IPL, so that's another long stint for him, the end of March until the end of May. And that was the other thing that I was thinking about, really, is just the length of the Indian domestic season here. We had the World Cup in October. The IPL finishes at the end of May. That's 8 months. And that is such an advantage, isn't it, to have 8 months where you can play cricket in decent weather, whereas we're trying to squeeze in 4 competitions in effectively our summer's, 4 months, and then you try and squeeze it around the edges in April and September. And that leads to a lot of angst and, a really congested fixture list. Whereas here, they can fit it all in. I mean, the WPL's going on at the moment in Delhi.
Ranji Trophy, is it semi-finals of the Ranji Trophy? Where are we up to with that, or finals?
Yeah, so Washington Sundar actually was released from the squad to go and play for Tamil Nadu, which is his state. It's another example of, the BCI wanting their players to play domestic cricket as much as they can. I think they're playing a semi-final against Mumbai, and I think Shardul Thakur got 100 today in that game. So the Ranji Trophy is bubbling up to its conclusion as well. I mean, there's cricket everywhere you look in this country, which is not surprising. Our friend DK is practicing hard ahead of his last hurrah in the IPL. So we'll have to try and catch up with him during the IPL. All right, well, the test match coming Thursday, the last one of 5. Let's hope for another cracker. And I'll see you on the other side, Nas.
Yeah, don't mention the weather, ever.